Never heard back until this week. These newly released documents by the FBI show they did agree to test the sample, but the letter never reached him.
From a ranger's face-off with an 8-foot humanoid ape to the FBI leaking classified documents, the terrifying secret hidden in Yosemite National Park has been revealed. For the longest time, individual stories have been reported regarding eerie encounters with strange humanoid beings by park rangers across the U.S. Despite the many reports, there was a pretty successful attempt to cover them up. But in the end, all truths come to light no matter how deep they may be buried. Face off with an 8-foot humanoid ape. A report filed by Park Ranger M. Thompson of Yosemite National Park detailed an encounter that started with a routine animal rescue and turned into something entirely unexpected. He explained that a couple visiting the Upper Pines area came to his station to report a bobcat trapped in an illegal animal trap about 300 yards from their campsite. Hearing this and equipped with a catch-all pole, Thompson drove the couple back to their site, where they pointed him toward the direction of the trapped animal. Even before he reached the area, he could hear the cries and growls of the bobcat echoing through the woods. The animal sounded desperate. He suggested the couple stay back, knowing that having multiple people approach would likely make the bobcat panic even more. It was about a 5-minute walk to the trap from where he left them. As he got close, the distinct cries of the animal grew louder, and the air became filled with an intense, pungent odor.
I knew exactly what we had on camera. It was proof to me and my dad, because who on a Tuesday night is a mile and a half into the woods running around with no flashlight?
The smell was strong enough to make him uncomfortable, and it only intensified the closer he got. At first, he thought the bobcat might have soiled itself in fear, but this smell was unlike anything he'd encountered before. It wasn't the usual scent of animal waste he'd grown to know about in his years as a ranger. It was a mix of wet fur, rotting meat, and an overwhelming skunk-like musk. Thompson spotted the bobcat struggling in the trap when he was about 25 yards from the animal. Its front paw was caught in the jaws, and blood was visible from its repeated attempts to free itself. The ranger paused to assess the situation, carefully considering how to use the catch-all pole to secure the animal while minimizing further injury. What struck him as odd was how the bobcat seemed more focused on something beyond the ridge than on him approaching. The animal glanced briefly in his direction, but then quickly returned its eyes to the ridgeline about 100 yards north. Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He began to hear faint rustling noises and an odd growling sound from the ridge. An uncanny feeling washed over him as he worked. It felt like he was being watched.
We had no idea what it was. It was just moseying on along like it didn't have a care in the world.
His first thought was that a larger predator, maybe a bear or wolf, might be nearby, drawn to the trapped bobcat as an easy meal. The idea of being between a predator and its prey made him uneasy, and he knew he had to work fast. The smell, which had already been overpowering, now seemed to saturate the air, making it hard for him to concentrate. Thompson approached cautiously, taking his time to get the catch-all pole around the bobcat's neck. The animal was clearly in a heightened state of panic, and its movements made the task difficult. He secured the bobcat and moved closer to the trap, careful not to startle the animal further. As he worked to free the bobcat, the noises from the ridge grew louder, though they were still faint and hard to pinpoint. The growling sound sent chills through him, and he found himself glancing toward the ridge more often than he normally would. The feeling of being observed grew stronger with each passing moment. After about 5 minutes of struggling with the mechanism, Thompson managed to press down on the trap with his foot, using enough force to pry the jaws open. The bobcat, sensing freedom, squirmed violently in his grip. Its strength surprised him, pulling him off balance more than once. Finally, Thompson loosened the loop of the catch-all pole, freeing the bobcat completely. Despite its injured paw, the animal ran away at an incredible speed, disappearing into the underbrush almost instantly. Thompson stood there for a moment, catching his breath and trying to process what had just happened. The smell was still in the air, and the strange noises from the ridge seemed to fade, though the feeling of being watched hadn't entirely gone away. Thompson found himself scanning the area, uneasy but unsure of what, if anything, was out there. But the horror had just begun.
I was responding back to them. And that was probably the most unique Bigfoot encounter I've ever had.
Thompson described how the strange sounds in the distance had faded, almost as if whatever was out there had been scared off by the commotion with the bobcat. He briefly scanned the area, but it was hard to tell if anything was actually there. Even with the thinner winter tree line, nothing stood out. Needing to document the trap site for his report, Thompson returned to his truck to grab his camera and notebook. He warned the campers to stay alert for large predators, explaining that the injured bobcat might attract them. He also advised them to be careful on their hikes and not to leave food out overnight. Back at the trap site, Thompson started taking notes and prepared to film the trap for his records. He'd recently bought an 8mm camera for a family event and had been enjoying experimenting with it. He thought it might be fun to capture some wildlife while on the job. As he began filming, the awful smell returned, even stronger than before. He heard heavy rustling and distinct snorting sounds coming from the ridgeline. Whatever had been there earlier was back. This time, as it came into view, Thompson realized it wasn't a bear or a wolf. He saw a massive, upright figure covered in dark, matted brown hair. From where he stood, it looked about 7 to 8 feet tall. Its movements were unlike any animal he'd seen before. It walked with a human-like gait, but had a distinct primate quality. The creature paused at the top of the ridge and looked directly at Thompson. Both of them stood frozen, watching each other. Thompson's first instinct was to reach for his gun, but something told him that wouldn't be wise. Instead, he raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. The creature studied him briefly, then made a series of low, guttural sounds that seemed almost musical, as if trying to communicate. Thompson admitted that despite his initial terror, he began to feel a strange sense of calm. It was as if the creature didn't mean him any harm, and he had no intention of hurting it either. The creature seemed curious and completely in control of the moment.
The creature that we're seeing in this video is clearly bipedal. The only other animal in this area that would be able to walk bipedally would be a bear walking on its hind legs. But when they do, they typically waddle more and take shorter steps. This being is clearly taking larger steps than a black bear would.
Thompson, still in shock, suddenly realized he was holding his camera. As he slowly lifted it to start filming, the creature turned and disappeared back over the ridge. After freeing the trapped bobcat, Thompson decided to track the strange creature he had spotted nearby. He followed it from a distance, filming as much as he could before it disappeared. One moment, it was there, and the next, it was gone, as if it had vanished into thin air. Thompson only managed to capture a few brief moments of the encounter on film. He admitted to standing still for several minutes, staring into the thick woods, hoping to see the creature again. Everything around him had gone eerily quiet, as if the sound had been completely drained from the area. Eventually, he returned to clean up the trap site before heading back to his office. Thompson didn't know how to explain what he saw or how to warn the campers about it. He wasn't even sure what it was himself. The campers, however, felt uneasy after the events of the day and decided to leave the area. Thompson didn't blame them. On top of that, he now had a better idea of what these large traps might have been intended for and planned to search for and remove more of them in the future. There was speculation that Thompson might have encountered a Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot. Reports of sightings were common in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, especially during the early 1970s. At the time, many scientists refused to seriously discuss such claims. However, one exception was British primatologist John Napier, who studied the Bigfoot phenomenon in the 1970s. In 1973, the same year as Thompson's encounter, Napier published a book, Bigfoot, the Yeti and Sasquatch in Myth and Reality. Napier's research included interviews with eyewitnesses and amateur investigators, as well as reviews of evidence such as footprints and the famous Patterson-Gimlin film from Bluff Creek, California. While Napier found the evidence inconclusive, he believed the footprints and eyewitness accounts couldn't be dismissed.
This particular animal's footprints have been found on a number of occasions. In 1991, 1992, 96.
There were remarkable similarities that suggested these could in fact be the same individual.
Napier stated he was convinced that something, a humanoid giant, had lived in Northwest America and that the people needed more information about it. Following Thompson's report, some wondered if Thompson avoided speculating in his report about what he saw to avoid public ridicule. And they seemed to be right. The idea of Bigfoot has never been widely accepted by the general public, even at the height of reported sightings, which may have given Ranger Thompson pause for claiming it to be famous. For those who do believe today, there are several organizations dedicated to the research and investigation of Bigfoot sightings. The oldest and largest is the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, which was established in 1995. The BFRO provides a free database on its website documenting reported sightings and encounters submitted from across North America, all of which have been investigated by researchers to determine credibility. What could these unorthodox professionals have discovered? Perhaps humanity is dealing with a highly intelligent creature that has evolved and adapted throughout the years to the ever-growing world, pushing itself deeper into uninhabited territory and avoiding humans. Or people simply love this campfire monster myth and want the legend to remain just that, a legend, a story, an icon. Despite this, Bigfoot's alleged sightings continue to be reported every now and then. At one point, even the FBI got involved in the research. The FBI gets involved. It's been confirmed that even the FBI got in on the chase for answers for the existence of Bigfoot when its rumors of being spotted were at their peak. According to the newly released file on Bigfoot, which arrived at the FBI records vault on June 5, 2019, the agency was involved in at least one particular incident in Bigfoot history. The feds analyzed a biological sample that at one point was thought to belong to Bigfoot. But where did they get the sample? In the 1970s, Peter Byrne, a Bigfoot investigator, who was then the director of the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition, followed up on a possible credible sighting of the mythical creature.
Bigfoot may be an urban myth to most people, but in the late 70s, the FBI was investigating whether or not Sasquatch really existed.
During this expedition, according to reports by the Washington Post, Byrne acquired a sample of several hairs and some skin believed to belong to Bigfoot. Following this, Byrne wrote to the FBI several times in 1976, asking if they'd perform an analysis of the hairs, which Byrne noted that his group was unable to identify. On top of that, Byrne also wanted to know if the FBI had analyzed suspected Bigfoot hair before, and if so, he wished to know what the Bureau's conclusion was. These letters make up the bulk of the file and are now available to the public via the FBI records vault. Indeed, the publicly available file primarily deals with Byrne's quest to get the hairs analyzed. It features a lot of correspondence between Byrne, Assistant Director of the FBI's Scientific and Technical Services Division, J. Cochran, Jr., and Howard Curtis of the Academy of Applied Sciences in Boston, with which the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition was affiliated. Initially, the correspondence mainly consists of Byrne and Cochran going back and forth, but eventually, the request is finally approved. In a letter Cochran addressed to Byrne dated December 15, 1976, he wrote, "The FBI laboratory conducts examinations primarily of physical evidence for law enforcement agencies in connection with criminal investigations. Occasionally, on a case-by-case basis, in the interest of research and scientific inquiry, we make exceptions to this general policy. With this understanding, we will examine the hairs and tissues mentioned in your letter." Also in the letter, Cochran instructed Byrne where to send his hair and tissue samples, along with a request for any available background information concerning the source of the specimen he might have had. Unfortunately, according to the Washington Post, Byrne never received this letter. Howard Curtis of the Academy of Applied Sciences, however, did, so he sent along the samples. The analysis was duly performed, with Cochran writing back to Curtis on Feb. 24, 1977, with the results. In Cochran's response, the hairs that Curtis had delivered to the FBI laboratory on behalf of the Bigfoot Information Center and Exhibition had been examined under incident light microscopy for root structure, medullary structure, and cuticle thickness. As if the microscopic screening was not enough already, the hairs were also compared directly with hairs of known origin under a comparison microscope, after which the FBI was, in fact, able to make an inference. What they found was not what they expected. It was concluded as a result of these examinations that the hairs were of deer family origin. 4 decades later, after the screening of the specimen, the Bureau declassified its Bigfoot file. Just to be clear, This is not evidence that the FBI endorsed the existence of Bigfoot.
And after one such sighting, he sent a clump of hairs that he believed belonged to Bigfoot to the FBI, asking them to test it.
Any more than the U.S. military's decades-long investigation of unexplained aerial phenomena, popularly known as UFOs, is an endorsement of the existence of aliens. To back this up, Benjamin Radford, a well-known American writer and skeptic, said, "All it means is the FBI did a favor to a Bigfoot researcher. There's nothing wrong with that, but it shouldn't be mistaken for de facto government endorsement of the reality of Bigfoot." Even so, Bigfoot believers may be tempted to see it the way they wish. Radford believed that Bigfoot lovers love the idea that there's a smoking gun in the FBI files. He believes that they are convinced that Bigfoot must be real. Otherwise, the FBI wouldn't have taken the matter seriously. Supporting his stance that Bigfoot does not exist, Radford claimed that the FBI didn't send out a team of investigators to look for Bigfoot. Instead, they agreed only to run an analysis of 15 hairs. To add more layers to what is already an unusual case, 93-year-old Byrne didn't seem to remember receiving the FBI's response that the Bigfoot hair he had sent them was actually deer hair. Knowing that Byrne had been out of the country for several months, Cochran sent the letter to the executive vice president of the Academy of Applied Science, which was associated with Byrne's Bigfoot organization. The executive wrote that he would give Byrne copies of the letter when he returned. Yet when the FBI released its Bigfoot file, which was exclusively about Byrne's inquiry, on June 5, 2019, Byrne reacted as though he were hearing that it was deer hair for the first time. "Obviously, I can't speak for Peter Byrne," Radford said, "but if you're going to make a big enough deal about this unknown specimen to give it to the FBI, then you're not going to want to publicize the fact that it turned out to be deer." While this is a disappointing revelation, by no means is the case closed. For all people know, the FBI could have Bigfoot documents that it isn't willing to show the public, and this is all just a clever strategy to throw the masses off in the search for Bigfoot.
Is it possible that during the genetic manipulation of human beings, we at one point started out as Sasquatch and Bigfoot and Yetis?
This can't be further from the truth, as numerous people claim to have encountered the strange creature, and even one captured it on camera. Bigfoot caught on camera. On a dark, quiet night, a man found himself face to face with a nightmare he could never have expected. The man remains anonymous, unwilling to let his identity be public, but his story has spread like wildfire because he captured something horrifying. Clear images of what can only be described as Bigfoot staring straight through his window. How did his story begin? It all started as an innocent escape that quickly turned into a chilling memory he'll never shake. Seeking peace, the man had retreated to a small cabin deep in Washington's wilderness, far from towns, people, and the constant noise of everyday city life. He was searching for calm, hoping the ancient trees and the serene winds would help him recharge. But nothing could prepare him enough for what he was about to encounter. On his second night, as he sat alone by the fireplace, soaking in the silence, a shadow crept up. At first it was nothing, just something catching the corner of his eye. Maybe it was just the woods settling in. At least, that's what he thought. But as he got up to close the blinds, his heart dropped. Outside, through the cold glass of the cabin window, a face was watching him, and to make matters worse, it wasn't human. The figure's face was massive, framed by tangled dark hair. Its eyes were deep set and gave off a faint, unnatural glow, piercing through the night with an unsettling intelligence. The creature stood tall on two legs in the shadows. His skin prickled as he realized it was watching him, studying him. Realizing this, every muscle in his body froze. He knew the stories about the creature and had heard the legends people laughed about, yet here he was, staring into the face of one of those very tales. Gathering what little courage he had left, he reached for his phone. His hands shook, making the first few photos blurry, but he kept clicking, each flash lighting up the creature's face for a brief, terrifying instant. Despite the flashlight, the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it only seemed more curious, almost entertained by his shaky movements. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature turned and vanished into the darkness beyond the cabin's glow, leaving the man with nothing but his hammering heartbeat and a deep, bone-chilling fear.
The fact that Bigfoot have been able to skirt about on the periphery and remain hidden and remain secretive and be seldom seen means that they're intelligent.
Following this scary encounter, the man couldn't sleep. Hours passed, and with every creak and rustle from outside, he imagined the creature coming back. When dawn finally broke, he dared to look at the photos. Most were blurred messes, but a few captured a clear, undeniable outline of something massive and powerful lurking outside his window. Still shaken, he thought of sharing his experience with the world. On the one hand, he feared ridicule from the masses. This is because Bigfoot sightings, after all, often ended with accusations of hoaxes and attention-seeking. But he also knew he had witnessed something rare, maybe even groundbreaking. After much hesitation, he decided to post the pictures online, using a fake name to avoid backlash. He uploaded them to several Facebook groups that focused on the subject, hoping to connect with people who might believe him. And the images went viral. Almost instantly, Bigfoot enthusiasts and researchers got hooked by his story, their excitement causing countless debates online. Some claimed this was it, the proof they had been waiting for. People shared his photos across forums, blogs, and social media, and stories poured in from others who swore they had seen the same creature in the forests of Washington. And just like that, the online debates began. Some skeptics examined the photos, pointing out the blurry edges, the lack of a video, and the absence of any other witnesses to confirm the man's claims. To them, the story seemed too perfect, just another tall tale thrown into the mix. But to those who believed, the details only strengthened their conviction. They noted the unique posture of the creature in the specific spot where it stood, and even compared these images to older sightings, finding eerie similarities. They saw these new photos as confirmation, believing they had finally glimpsed the forest's most elusive giant. Despite posting the images, the man refused to get pulled into the chaos. He'd said what he had to say, and he'd shown what he'd captured. He let the photos speak for themselves, watching as his anonymous story took on a life of its own. Redwood National Park. For years, these dense woodlands have been the focus of strange sightings and unexplained disappearances. Now, a ranger's bizarre encounter may be the breakthrough everyone has been waiting for. While patrolling a secluded service road in a restricted area of the park, the ranger came across a strange object, a large silver cube, perfectly smooth and 6 feet tall. It wasn't ordinary park equipment, and it definitely didn't belong there. The cube's surface was spotless, with no markings or logos, and it seemed completely out of place. Built into its side was a control panel displaying a jaw-dropping temperature of -200 degrees Celsius, far colder than anything typically used in environmental research. The object emitted a low mechanical hum, but there were no visible wires, power sources, or anything to indicate its purpose. This wasn't the only odd thing. The area around the cube had strange markings on the ground, impressions too large and deep to be from any known animal in the region. These tracks matched descriptions of footprints often attributed to Bigfoot.
Nearly 16
inches.
Wow! Raising the question, could this device be tied to a creature that has eluded science for generations? When the ranger reported the discovery to his supervisor, the response was unsettling. Instead of sending backup, the supervisor instructed him to stay away, take no photos, and leave the object untouched. This cryptic reaction only added to the mystery, suggesting the cube might be part of a classified operation, or something even more extraordinary. The discovery doesn't stand alone. It connects to recent footage of a massive ape-like figure moving through the park's dense forests. The video, captured by a seasoned outdoorsman, has left experts completely puzzled. When the park ranger pressed his supervisor for more details, the response was firm. The device was part of a specialized study and completely off-limits. No photos, no questions, no interference. For someone used to knowing what's happening in their park, this kind of secrecy felt out of place and suspicious. The Park Service often collaborates with universities, private organizations, and even NASA. But local staff are usually informed about these projects. This time, nothing. The cube's extreme cold, -200 degrees Celsius, and advanced design seemed more like science fiction than anything used for environmental research. Who placed it there, and why was it in such a remote spot?
We saw really bright red lights going clear across the sky really fast.
The next day, the ranger asked other staff if they knew anything about the equipment. Blank stares and jokes were the only responses. One joked that Bigfoot might have a new fridge, but nobody had seen or heard anything official. Even the supervisor stayed unusually quiet, brushing off any attempts to revisit the topic. This raised a serious question. Why the secrecy? If the cube was for environmental monitoring or research, it should have been documented like every other piece of equipment in the park. From stream gauges to pollen traps, these devices are always logged, labeled, and shared in briefings. But this cube? No labels, no announcements, just silence. Adding to the puzzle, the ranger recalled the faint cold air escaping from the cube's seam. At such low temperatures, a leak would normally cause frost or vapor, but this object seemed engineered to avoid even the smallest traces. Its design and operation were far more advanced than anything typically seen in the park. Could the cube be part of a covert experiment? Perhaps it's monitoring greenhouse gases or capturing samples in ways never done before. Or maybe the location was chosen because the dense forest and remote terrain offered the perfect cover. But if that's the case, why the lack of transparency? The cube's sudden appearance, its secrecy, and the eerie Bigfoot-like tracks nearby all hint at something bigger than a simple research project. Could the object be linked to recent sightings of the legendary creature? The location, timing, and strange circumstances suggest it might be. For now, the ranger hasn't returned to the site. The official response from the ranger's supervisor was short and unsettling. Leave it alone. No photos, no questions, and no further action. Respecting the chain of command, the ranger complied, but his curiosity refused to fade. What had he come across? Would he ever get the full story? Maybe, in a few years, the logs would be declassified, revealing it as a NASA astrobiology project or cutting-edge university research. Or maybe the truth would stay hidden forever. Whatever the case, this was by far the most puzzling discovery the ranger had ever made in the remote backcountry of Redwood National Park. Until someone higher up decided to provide answers, all he could do was speculate and hope that whatever it was posed no threat to the park, its visitors, or his own peace of mind. Now, let's get into other recent evidence of strange happenings. Dashcam footage from a trucker. The first story comes from Alberta, Canada, where a trucker captured something extraordinary on his dashcam. As he drove through a remote area, his camera recorded what appeared to be a massive figure, approximately 12 feet tall, moving through the trees. Strangely, the trucker didn't notice anything unusual at the time. It wasn't until he reviewed the footage later that the startling figure became clear. The video has been slowed down for analysis, frame by frame. Zooming in, the figure appears large, towering over the surrounding environment. But is it a genuine Bigfoot sighting or an elaborate hoax? If it's a prank, it's impressively well done. But if it's real, it could be groundbreaking evidence. One of the craziest stories involves a hunter who came across enormous tracks in the mud, far larger than those of any known animal. Amazed by what he saw, he set up a hunting blind and waited, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever made the tracks. Hours later, the hunter's patience paid off. From just 20 feet away, he saw what he believed to be Bigfoot. Even more astonishing, he recorded the encounter in crisp 4K resolution. The footage shows a towering humanoid figure.
He's coming. He's there. He's gonna pop up in a minute. There he is, popping up. Dig the berries.
If you look closely at the eyes and nose of the figure in the footage, they almost seem human-like. What's even more fascinating is how the person behind the camera was able to film the figure for so long. Usually, creatures like this, if they exist, are known for disappearing before anyone even realizes they're there. Rio Grande National Forest. Now, let's turn to another chilling story, this time deep in the rugged wilderness of Colorado's Rio Grande National Forest. Here lies Coast Canyon, a stunning but intimidating landscape of jagged cliffs, dense forest, and steep rocky slopes. For adventurers, it's a paradise. But for locals, it's also a place shrouded in mystery, a place where people sometimes vanish without a trace. On July 23, 2015, 19-year-old Joe Keller arrived at Rainbow Trout Ranch, nestled in the heart of Coast Canyon. It was supposed to be a fun road trip with his two closest friends, a celebration of freedom and adventure after high school. Joe was athletic, adventurous, and full of life, ready to take on anything. The ranch, surrounded by towering pines and crisp mountain air, felt like the perfect escape. But Coast Canyon has secrets, the kind that keep you awake at night. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Joe and his friends decided to go for a run. The trails through the canyon were rugged but offered breathtaking views of the jagged peaks and rushing river below. The three friends started off together, laughing as they ran. But soon, Joe, an experienced cross-country runner, pulled ahead. He waved back at his friends, smiling, and promised to meet them at the ranch. His bright running shoes flickered in the fading light as he disappeared around a bend in the trail. It was the last time anyone would see Joe Keller alive. When Joe didn't return by nightfall, his friends assumed he had taken a longer route or gotten distracted by the canyon's beauty. They searched nearby trails, calling his name, their voices echoing off the rocky walls. As the hours passed with no sign of Joe, their worry turned to fear.
The search has been suspended for a missing Cleveland teenager. 19-year-old Joseph Keller disappeared while out for a run in Colorado. Crews had been searching a 30-mile radius since July 23rd. The FBI is now involved in the case.
By morning, the search effort escalated. Local authorities, volunteers, park rangers, search and rescue teams, and even helicopters joined the operation. Tracking dogs scoured the trails, their noses seeking any trace of Joe. The terrain was brutal. Steep inclines, loose rocks, and dense underbrush made every step a challenge. Coast Canyon, for all its beauty, was a dangerous labyrinth of natural obstacles. But days turned into weeks, and despite the exhaustive effort, not a single clue emerged. Joe had vanished as if the forest itself had swallowed him whole. There were no footprints, no discarded belongings, nothing. The only sign of him was his phone, discovered miles from the ranch on a rocky outcropping. It offered no answers, only deepened the mystery. Speculation ran wild. Some believed Joe had fallen victim to the canyon's unforgiving terrain. A single misstep on the cliffs or ravines could send someone plunging into an unsearchable crevice. Yet no remains were ever found. Others suspected foul play. The remote wilderness of Coast Canyon has long been a place where people go to disappear or to hide something. Some thought Joe might have come across poachers, an illegal grow operation, or something worse. A nearby camper reported seeing a suspicious vehicle the night Joe vanished, but the lead went nowhere. Then there were the whispers of something beyond explanation. Locals spoke of strange happenings in Coast Canyon, flashes of light in the trees, disembodied voices calling out names, and an eerie stillness in certain areas, as if the forest was holding its breath. Some believed Joe encountered something supernatural, perhaps an ancient spirit said to protect the land. Even the search teams reported strange experiences. Volunteers described overwhelming feelings of dread in certain parts of the forest, as though they were being watched. One heard faint whispers from the trees but saw no one. Others found odd disturbances in the underbrush, as if someone had been resting there, but no footprints led to or from the site. As weeks turned to months, hope began to fade. The story of Joe Keller slipped from the headlines, but the unanswered questions haunted his family and friends. How could a strong, capable young man simply vanish without a trace? 2 years later, in 2017, the forest finally gave up one of its secrets. On a steep rocky slope, searchers came across skeletal remains. DNA testing confirmed what many had feared. It was Joe Keller. Authorities concluded that he had fallen to his death in the rough terrain. But even with this discovery, the questions didn't stop. How had Joe ended up so far from his intended route? Why hadn't the search teams, who had scoured the area multiple times, found him earlier?
Human remains have been found in the Rio Grande National Forest in Colorado. Now several locals believe the bones could belong to Joe Keller. The 18-year-old Cleveland resident vanished in the state last summer. The remains have been sent to a lab. Identification should be made in the next 3 months.
And what about the eerie phenomena reported by searchers during their efforts? For many, Joe's story remains a haunting reminder of the wilderness's power to both inspire and terrify. Coast Canyon, breathtaking by day, holds a darker allure at night. Its silence feels heavy, its shadows unnervingly deep, and its secrets endless. Visitors often wonder, what else might be hidden in those woods? Devil's Den State Park. Now, Let's journey to another mysterious location, this time to Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas. The story takes us back to 1946 in a rugged wilderness that spans 2,500 acres of untamed forest, limestone caves, and dangerous drop-offs. This area, known for its breathtaking beauty, was also infamous for its eerie reputation. Native Americans had warned settlers for generations to avoid the caves after dark, speaking of ancient spirits that dwelled within the limestone chambers. But the Van Alst family, arriving for a summer vacation, knew nothing of these warnings. On a warm summer day, their 8-year-old daughter, Catherine, vanished in an instant. One moment, she was playing in a creek with her brothers. The next, she was gone. No splash, no footprints in the mud, and no sound, just an eerie, sudden silence. Catherine was barefoot, wearing only a simple bathing suit. As night fell, the reality of her disappearance hit hard. Rangers knew this was no ordinary search and rescue mission. The dense, treacherous wilderness of Devil's Den had swallowed even the most experienced hikers. The caves, dark and uninviting, were avoided even by seasoned locals. The search became a desperate effort. Dogs, usually reliable in such cases, lost Catherine's scent almost immediately, as if she had vanished into thin air. Planes circled overhead, but the thick canopy of June foliage created a green ceiling that concealed everything below. Day after day, searchers combed the area, but they found no torn clothing, no disturbed branches, and no sign Catherine had even been there. By the 4th day, hope was fading. Night temperatures dipped below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to induce hypothermia. Catherine's bathing suit and bare feet were no match for the rugged wilderness, where even the searchers' boots and clothing were torn apart by the terrain. Then, on the 6th day, something impossible happened. 7 air miles from where Catherine had disappeared, over 20 miles of brutal, jagged terrain, searchers found her near the entrance of a cave. This was no ordinary cave. It had been searched twice before by separate teams. Catherine was sitting calmly, her feet swollen, but without the severe injuries one would expect from such a journey. Her bathing suit was intact, and she appeared healthy, despite 6 days in the wilderness. When the rescuers approached, she simply smiled and said, "Here I am." Her story puzzled everyone. Catherine claimed she had survived by eating berries and finding warm spots in the grass to sleep. Yet, when rangers retraced her possible routes, they found every path between the creek and the cave required navigating sheer cliffs, thorny undergrowth, and dangerous ravines. The discovery defied explanation. How had Catherine traveled so far, barefoot and alone, without a single significant injury? How had she survived 6 days in a wilderness filled with bears, mountain lions, venomous snakes, and poisonous berries? And why hadn't the search teams found her in the cave during their earlier searches? For the Van Alst family and the search teams, Catherine's rescue brought relief, but left behind a host of unsettling questions. The girl's survival was nothing short of a mystery. She explained that she had eaten red and black berries during her time in the wilderness. Yet, what puzzled experts was that most berries fitting her description in Devil's Den are known to be highly poisonous, some even deadly, with just a small handful. Somehow, Catherine not only survived eating them, but showed no signs of illness. Her behavior when she was found was equally puzzling. Instead of being scared or in shock, like most lost children, Catherine seemed calm, almost at peace. She even mentioned seeing the search dogs but admitted to hiding from them. This was strange because trained search dogs, especially ones with advanced scent tracking abilities, should have easily found her. Yet, during the entire 6-day search, not a single dog picked up her scent, even when she was supposedly nearby. The situation grew even stranger when rangers realized she was discovered in a cave that search teams had already checked twice. How could they have missed her? Or was she never there until later? It raised the unsettling possibility that someone or something might have returned her to that spot after the search teams had moved on. Catherine also spoke about warm grass, where she would rest at night, even though the forest temperatures dipped low enough to cause hypothermia in such minimal clothing. It was as if she had been protected from the harsh environment by something beyond explanation. After her rescue, Catherine's family avoided public attention and left Devil's Den behind. But the mystery surrounding her survival continues to perplex everyone. experienced hikers, equipped with proper gear and supplies, have tried to recreate her journey, yet none could complete the distance in less than 4 days. Somehow, an 8-year-old girl in a swimsuit and barefoot managed it without a scratch. The eerie nature of Devil's Den doesn't stop with Catherine's story. Local Native American elders have long warned against venturing into the cave systems, speaking of ancient spirits believed to live in the limestone chambers. These beings were said to protect lost travelers, but change them in ways people couldn't fully understand. There's one more chilling detail. When doctors examined her after she was rescued, they noted her skin was unusually warm to the touch, as if something had been keeping her body temperature steady during those 6 days. Even today, the caves of Devil's Den are avoided by many. Park rangers rarely go near them alone, especially after dark. The story of Catherine is a reminder that some parts of the wilderness hold secrets we might never understand. Darren's encounter. Some places hold secrets, and sometimes curiosity leads you right into them. For Darren, the summer of 1992 was supposed to be his last big adventure before settling down and saying, "I do." A seasoned camper and hiker, he wanted one final trip to explore the wilderness and find the kind of stories people dream of telling. Little did he know, this would be the story he'd never want to tell. Early that morning, Darren packed his truck and headed to a remote area of a national park he'd heard wild tales about. With a pistol at his hip, just in case, he followed an old, dry riverbed trail deep into the forest. The area was so untouched, it felt like humans had barely ever set foot there. Darren felt the familiar thrill of adventure. After hours of hiking, he found himself at a strange spot where the air seemed to shift. The breeze disappeared, replaced by an eerie stillness that clung to the clearing ahead. His gut twisted, and he froze mid-step, overwhelmed by a sudden, unshakable feeling. Something wasn't right. Then he saw it. About 100 yards away, something dark and massive stood among the bushes. It wasn't moving, but Darren felt its presence demanded his attention.
A wolf head staring at you.
Staring at me, keeping up with me. I'm at about 20 miles an hour.
Slowly, he raised his binoculars, ignoring the overwhelming urge to stop. What he saw sent a cold chill through his body. The creature was enormous, covered in black fur, with a face so dark that its features were barely visible except for its gleaming white fangs. It stood unnaturally still, staring at him from under a heavy brow. Darren tried to convince himself it was a bear, but deep down, he knew better. Suddenly, the creature vanished into the brush, faster than Darren could comprehend. For a brief moment, he relaxed, thinking it was gone. Then it reappeared, closer this time, only 70 yards away. Its hollow black eyes seemed to burn right through him, and Darren swore he heard a voice in his head. If only you hadn't looked. The creature's presence was suffocating. It was playing with him, moving in and out of the bushes, each time getting closer. Darren's mind raced with horrifying thoughts: how it might attack, how much it would hurt, and whether he'd be alive long enough to feel it tear him apart. When it appeared just 20 feet away, towering over the 6-foot-tall bushes, Darren was sure he was finished. The creature crouched as if ready to pounce. Darren stumbled backward, desperate to escape, when suddenly a deafening boom shattered the silence. A reddish-brown blur barreled past Darren and slammed into the creature's chest. Darren could barely understand what he was seeing. Two giant beasts locked in a vicious battle. Claws, teeth, and roars filled the air as they tore into each other. Darren was frozen in shock, unable to move as the ground trembled beneath their fight. Then, out of the trees, a second creature appeared. It was even larger than the first, and before Darren could process what was happening, it launched itself into the fray. With a devastating blow, the new arrival ended the fight, leaving the first creature lifeless on the ground. The two Sasquatches, because that's what Darren knew they had to be, stood over their fallen enemy, ensuring it wouldn't get back up. The larger one let out a thunderous roar that echoed through the forest, then dragged the body into the trees. The smaller Sasquatch, still towering at about 9 feet tall, turned its attention to Darren. For a moment, they locked eyes. Darren realized his rifle was still aimed at the creature, and he quickly lowered it. The Sasquatch seemed to relax, but as it started moving toward him, Darren's vision blurred. The adrenaline, fear, and exhaustion finally caught up to him, and the ground seemed to rise up to meet his face. When Darren woke, it was dark. He was leaning against his truck, his rifle beside him. His pounding head and aching body felt like he'd been hit by a freight train. At first, he thought it had all been a nightmare, some wild hallucination from too much sun or not enough water. But when he stood and turned to get into his truck, he froze. On the hood, perfectly pressed into the dusty surface, was a massive handprint. It was unmistakable, far too large to be human, and left exactly where something tall would steady itself to set something down. Reality hit Darren like a bolt of lightning. It wasn't a dream. It was all real. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing his gear, he jumped into his truck and sped off, vowing never to return. For years, Darren kept the story to himself, too terrified and ashamed to tell anyone. But the memory of that day, the creatures, the battle, and that handprint haunted his dreams. Some secrets, Darren realized, are better left in the woods,